What happens when a duchess walks onto a talk show expecting royal treatment, only to discover that American television doesn't bow to anyone? In just 33 seconds, one comment would turn a friendly interview into the most shocking meltdown ever broadcast on daytime TV. Mark Consuelos settled into his chair that morning with his usual warmth and energy, ready to welcome another guest to his show. The studio audience buzzed with excitement. They were about to witness something that nobody, not even the producers, could have predicted. Meghan Markle walked onto the set with an air of confidence that immediately filled the room. The audience applauded politely as she made her way to the guest chair. Mark stood to greet her, extending his hand with a genuine smile. "Welcome to the show. It's great to have you here," Mark said, and his tone friendly and professional. Meghan took her seat, smoothing down her dress with deliberate precision. She looked around the studio as if evaluating whether it met her standards. The camera operators adjusted their positions, ready to capture what they assumed would be a standard celebrity interview. "Thank you for having me," Meghan replied, though her voice carried a certain coolness that Mark immediately noticed. Mark glanced down at his notes, preparing to ease into the conversation with some light questions. He had done thousands of interviews before. This was supposed to be simple, straightforward, enjoyable for everyone involved. "So, let's jump right in," Mark began. "You've been working on several new projects lately. Can you tell us what you've been up to?" Meghan shifted in her seat, crossing her legs and tilting her head slightly. "Well, Mark, I've been incredibly busy with things that actually matter. Humanitarian work, advocacy, real substance, not just, entertainment fluff." The audience went quiet. Mark's eyebrows raised just slightly, but he maintained his composure. He'd dealt with difficult guests before, but the dismissive tone caught him off guard. "Entertainment fluff," Mark repeated, letting the words hang in the air for a moment. "Well, I'd argue that entertainment brings joy to millions of people. That's pretty meaningful." Meghan waved her hand dismissively. "Sure, if you want to think of it that way. But some of us are focused on changing the world, making a real difference. Not everyone can understand that level of responsibility." Mark leaned back in his chair, his smile now more measured. The producers in the control room exchanged worried glances. This was not going according to plan. "I think a lot of people watching right now understand responsibility quite well," Mark said calmly. "Many of them are working multiple jobs, raising families, contributing to their communities every single day." Of course, Meghan said, though her tone suggested she didn't really mean it. "But you have to admit, there are different levels to everything. Some people operate on a different plane altogether." The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Mark could feel the energy in the room changing. He decided to redirect the conversation, trying to salvage what was quickly becoming a train wreck. "Let's talk about your latest initiative," Mark suggested, looking down at his notes again. "You've been speaking about mental health awareness, which is obviously very important." "Yes, mental health," Meghan said, suddenly animated. "It's something I'm uniquely qualified to speak about, given everything I've been through. The pressure, the scrutiny, the constant media attention. Most people couldn't handle what I've dealt with." Mark nodded slowly. "Mental health affects everyone differently. I'm sure many people in this audience have faced their own battles." "Well, yes, but not on my scale," Meghan interrupted. "When you're in the public eye at the level I've been, when you've lived the life I've lived, the challenges are exponentially greater. It's not really comparable to everyday struggles." A woman in the audience actually gasped. Mark's jaw tightened ever so slightly, but he kept his professional demeanor intact. "I think pain is pain," Mark said carefully. "Whether you're dealing with public scrutiny or private hardship, suffering is valid regardless of your circumstances." Meghan laughed, but it wasn't a warm sound. "That's a very sweet sentiment, Mark. Very democratic of you. But let's be realistic here. There's a difference between struggling to pay bills and dealing with international press invasions of your privacy. Both can be devastating, Mark countered, his voice firm but still controlled. And I don't think we should rank people's pain. I'm not ranking anything, Meghan said, her voice rising slightly. I'm simply stating facts. Some people have more complex lives than others. That's just reality. Mark took a breath. He could feel the interview slipping further away from anything resembling productive conversation. The audience was now completely silent, watching the exchange with wide eyes. Let's try a different topic, Mark offered, attempting once more to steer things back on track. Your podcast received a lot of attention. What inspired you to start that? Finally, a good question, Meghan said, and Mark's expression flickered with barely concealed frustration. I started the podcast because I have important things to say. I have a platform, and unlike some people, I choose to use it for good. I interview people who matter, discuss issues that matter. It's not just mindless chatter. Interesting, Mark said, and anyone paying attention could hear the edge creeping into his voice. So you see your work as more important than other people's? I didn't say that exactly, Meghan backtracked slightly, but yes. I think there's a hierarchy of value when it comes to content. Some conversations are more elevated than others. The audience began to murmur. Mark glanced at them briefly before returning his attention to Meghan. I have to respectfully disagree, Mark said. I think every conversation has value if it connects with people, if it makes them feel something, if it brings them together. Meghan rolled her eyes. Actually rolled her eyes. On camera. In front of a live studio audience. That's very idealistic, Mark, she said condescendingly. But in the real world, some voices carry more weight than others. Some people have earned the right to be taken more seriously. Earned the right, Mark repeated slowly. By what measure? By experience? By sacrifice? By what they've overcome? Meghan said, her voice growing more intense. I've given up everything for my principles. I've walked away from comfort, from security, from an entire institution, because I refuse to be silenced. How many people can say that? Mark leaned forward now, his elbows on his knees. I think millions of people make sacrifices every day that we never hear about. Single parents, immigrants, people caring for sick family members, people working thankless jobs to keep food on the table. Their stories matter just as much. Of course their stories matter, Meghan said impatiently. But we're not talking about them right now. We're talking about me and my work. Right, Mark said, and there was an unmistakable tone of irony in his voice now. Your work. Meghan's eyes narrowed. I don't appreciate your tone. And I don't appreciate the way you're dismissing everyday people's experiences, Mark shot back, his patience clearly wearing thin. The audience actually applauded at this. Meghan's face flushed red. Excuse me, she said, her voice sharp. I have dedicated my life to helping people. How dare you suggest otherwise? I'm not questioning your charity work, Mark clarified. I'm questioning your attitude right now, in this moment, toward people who might not have your platform or your resources. Meghan stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over her chair. The sudden movement startled everyone in the studio. This is outrageous, she declared. I came here to have a respectful conversation, and instead, I'm being attacked. Mark remained seated, his expression calm but firm. Nobody's attacking you. So we're having a discussion. You've made several comments that I think deserve to be challenged. Challenged? Meghan's voice was getting louder now. Who do you think you are to challenge me? Do you know what I've been through? Do you know who I am? I know exactly who you are, Mark said evenly. You're a guest on this show, just like everyone else who sits in that chair. And on this show, we treat everyone with respect, but we also expect respect in return. The audience erupted in applause again, louder this time. Meghan looked around, seemingly shocked that they were supporting Mark over her. This is unbelievable, she said, her voice shaking with anger. I've never been treated this way. This is completely unprofessional. What's unprofessional? Mark said, standing up now to match her energy. Or is coming onto someone's show and belittling their work, their audience, and the very platform you agreed to appear on. Meghan's mouth opened and closed several times. I did no such thing. You called entertainment fluff, Mark listed calmly. You suggested that your struggles are more important than other people's. You dismissed the value of everyday conversations. You rolled your eyes when I tried to defend the dignity of regular people's experiences. Should I go on? The color drained from Meghan's face, then returned in an angry flush. You're twisting my words. I'm repeating them, Mark corrected. Your exact words. A producer stepped onto the stage, trying to diffuse the situation. Maybe we should take a quick break. No, Meghan said sharply. I don't need a break. What I need is an apology. Mark crossed his arms. An apology for what exactly? For ambushing me, for creating this hostile environment, for allowing your audience to disrespect me, Meghan said, gesturing wildly toward the crowd. My audience didn't disrespect you, Mark said firmly. They simply responded honestly to what they were hearing. That's what real people do. They react authentically. Real people, Meghan scoffed, as if I'm not a real person, as if my feelings don't matter. Your feelings absolutely matter, Mark said, his voice softer now, but still strong. But so do theirs. So do mine. You can't walk into a room and expect everyone to simply agree with everything you say without question. Meghan grabbed her purse from beside the chair. I don't have to listen to this. You're absolutely right, Mark agreed. You don't. You're free to leave anytime you want. But if you do, everyone watching will see that you couldn't handle a simple conversation where someone politely disagreed with you. That stopped Meghan in her tracks. She stood there, purse clutched to her chest, visibly trembling with fury. This isn't disagreement, she hissed. This is disrespect. How is it disrespectful to suggest that all people's experiences have value? Mark asked genuinely. How is it disrespectful to push back when someone implies they're more important than others? Because I never said that, Meghan shouted, and the entire studio went dead silent. Mark didn't flinch. Then what did you mean when you said some people operate on a different plane? When you said your challenges are exponentially greater? When you talked about hierarchies of value and earning the right to be taken seriously? Meghan's eyes darted around the room, looking for support that wasn't coming. The audience stared at her. The cameras captured every moment of her growing discomfort. Context, she stammered. You're taking everything out of context. The context is clear, Mark said. You came here expecting to be treated like royalty. And when that didn't happen, when you were treated like a regular guest having a regular conversation, you couldn't handle it. That's not true, Meghan protested, but her voice lacked conviction now. Then sit down, Mark challenged. Sit back down and let's have an actual conversation. A real one, where we both listen to each other, where we both show mutual respect. Meghan hesitated. For a moment, it looked like she might actually do it. But then her pride kicked in. I will not be spoken to this way, she declared. I have been nothing but gracious, and you've been hostile from the start. Mark shook his head slowly. I greeted you warmly. I asked you about your projects. I tried multiple times to keep this conversation positive. You're the one who chose to make it contentious. You're gaslighting me, Meghan accused. Right here, in front of everyone. This is emotional manipulation. The audience actually laughed at that. Not cruelly, but in disbelief. Mark looked genuinely stunned. Gaslighting, he repeated. I'm gaslighting you by pointing out things you actually said, on camera, that everyone here witnessed. Your tone, your body language, your constant interruptions, Meghan listed desperately. All designed to make me look bad. I haven't interrupted you once, Mark said calmly. And if anyone looks bad right now, it's because of choices you're making, not anything I'm doing. Meghan's hands were shaking. She looked around the studio one more time, as if hoping someone would come to her rescue. Nobody moved. "Where's your producer?" she demanded. "I want to speak to whoever's in charge here." "I'm in charge here," Mark said simply. "This is my show." That seemed to infuriate Meghan even more. "Then you're responsible for this disaster. You're responsible for creating this toxic environment." "The only toxicity I'm seeing," Mark said carefully, "is coming from someone who can't accept that they're not the most important person in the room." The audience gasped. It was a harsh statement, but after everything they'd witnessed, many of them nodded in agreement. Meghan's face contorted with rage. "How dare you? How absolutely dare you speak to me that way? Do you know what I could do to your career? Do you know the connections I have? The influence I wield?" Mark's expression hardened. "Are you threatening me? On my own show?" "I'm stating facts," Meghan said coldly. "You've made a very big mistake today, Mark. A mistake you're going to regret." "The only mistake I'm seeing," Mark replied, his voice steely now, "is giving someone a platform who clearly has no respect for anyone but themselves." Meghan's mouth fell open. "You cannot talk to me like this." "I can, and I am," Mark said. "Because unlike whatever world you've been living in, out here in reality, people don't just bow down and agree with everything you say. Out here, we have conversations. We challenge each other. We grow. But you can't grow if you think you're already above everyone else." "I am done," Meghan announced, her voice shrill. "I am done with this interview. Done with this show. Done with you." "That's your choice," Mark said, stepping back and gesturing toward the exit. "The door's right there." Meghan stared at him, clearly expecting him to back down, to apologize, to beg her to stay. When he did none of those things, her shock was visible. "You're really going to let me walk out of here?" she said, almost as a question. "I'm not keeping you here against your will," Mark replied. "If you want to leave, leave. If you want to stay and have an actual conversation, I'm willing to do that too. But I'm not going to sit here and let you insult my audience, my profession, and or the very concept that all people deserve dignity and respect." The studio was so quiet you could hear the cameras whirring. Meghan took one step toward the exit, then stopped. "This will be everywhere tomorrow. Everyone will know how you treated me." "Good," Mark said simply. "Let them know. Let them see exactly what happened here." The cameras caught everything. The audience saw everything. The truth speaks for itself. That seemed to shake Meghan. She realized, perhaps for the first time, that she had no control over the narrative here. Everything had been recorded. Everything had witnesses. "You planned this," she accused suddenly. "This was a setup from the beginning." Mark actually laughed, a short, incredulous sound. "A setup? You think I wanted this to happen? You think this is good for my show? Me having a guest melt down on camera? Then why did you provoke me?" Meghan demanded. "I didn't provoke you," Mark said, exasperated now. "I disagreed with you. That's not the same thing. Adults are supposed to be able to handle disagreement." "Not when it's done disrespectfully," Meghan shot back. "Show me one moment, one single moment where I disrespected you," Mark challenged. "Before you started insulting my show, my work, and my audience, show me where I was disrespectful." Meghan opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She couldn't point to a specific moment because there wasn't one. Mark had been professional throughout, even when she hadn't been. "That's what I thought," Mark said quietly. "This isn't over," Meghan warned, her voice low and threatening. "It is for today," Mark said firmly. "Because I'm asking you to leave my show. Right now." The audience gasped again. This was it. The moment everyone would be talking about. Meghan's eyes went wide. "You're kicking me off?" "I'm asking you to leave, yes," Mark confirmed. "You've been disrespectful, dismissive, and now threatening. I don't allow that kind of behavior on my show, regardless of who you are." You can't do this to me, Meghan said, but her voice cracked. I can, and I am, Mark stated. Please gather your things and exit the stage. Meghan stood frozen for several long seconds. The cameras captured every nuance of her expression as she processed what was happening. Shock gave way to humiliation, then back to anger. You will pay for this, she said through gritted teeth. I'll take that risk, Mark replied calmly. Security personnel appeared at the edge of the stage, ready to intervene if necessary. Meghan noticed them, and her face flushed an even deeper shade of red. Security? You called security on me? Her voice was shrill with disbelief. Standard protocol when a guest becomes hostile, Mark explained. They're just here to make sure everyone stays safe. I'm not dangerous, Meghan protested. This is absurd. This is theater. You're putting on a show to humiliate me. You're doing that all by yourself, Mark said sadly. I genuinely wish this had gone differently. I really do. But you made your choices, and now we're here. Meghan looked at the audience one final time. Some faces showed sympathy, but most showed disappointment, or even anger. They'd come expecting to see a pleasant interview. And instead, they'd witness someone reveal their true character in the worst possible way. You're all going to regret this, Meghan said to the crowd. Every single one of you. Nobody responded. The silence was deafening. Mark gestured toward the exit again. Please. Meghan gripped her purse tighter and walked toward the stage exit, her heels clicking loudly in the quiet studio. Every eye followed her. Every camera tracked her movement. She paused at the edge of the stage, turning back one last time. This isn't who I am, she said, her voice suddenly smaller, almost pleading. Mark's expression softened slightly. Then maybe it's time to think about who you want to be. For just a second, something flickered across Meghan's face. Uncertainty. Maybe even the beginning of self-awareness. But then it was gone, replaced by the hard mask of defiance. Goodbye, Mark, she said coldly. Goodbye, he replied simply. And then she was gone, disappearing into the wings of the studio. The audience sat in stunned silence for several heartbeats before erupting into thunderous applause. They were applauding Mark, supporting him, validating his decision to stand up for respect and dignity. Mark stood alone on the stage, looking somewhat shaken by what had just transpired. He ran a hand through his hair and took a deep breath. Well, he said to the audience, his voice a bit unsteady. That was not how I expected this morning to go. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. I want to apologize to all of you, Mark continued. You came here for entertainment, for a good time, and instead you got a front row seat to something pretty uncomfortable. You did the right thing, someone shouted from the audience. Others voiced their agreement. Mark smiled gratefully. I appreciate that, he said. But I don't take any pleasure in what just happened. I never want to make a guest feel unwelcome or uncomfortable. That's not what this show is about. She was disrespectful to you, another audience member called out. Mark nodded slowly. She was, and I could have handled it differently. Maybe I could have been more patient, more understanding. But there's a line, you know. There's a point where patience becomes enabling, where understanding becomes acceptance of unacceptable behavior. The audience applauded again. The thing is, Mark went on, warming to the subject now, I believe everyone deserves respect. Everyone. Rich, poor, famous, unknown, it doesn't matter. We're all human beings trying to navigate this complicated world. And when someone suggests that their struggles matter more than yours, that their voice carries more weight, that their experiences are more valid, well, that's when I have to speak up. More applause, louder this time. Because you matter, Mark said, pointing to the audience. Your stories matter. Your pain matters. Your joy matters. You don't need a title or a platform or millions of followers to be worthy of dignity and respect. You're worthy simply because you exist. Several people in the audience were visibly emotional now. One woman was wiping tears from her eyes. "So yeah, maybe that got messy," Mark admitted. "Maybe it wasn't pretty television. But I hope, if nothing else, you all know that on this show, you're valued. All of you. Always." The standing ovation that followed was spontaneous and genuine. Mark stood there, humbled by the response, grateful for an audience that understood what he'd been trying to do. The confrontation was over. The guest was gone, but the message remained clear. No matter who you are or what you've accomplished, respect is earned through how you treat others. And on Mark Consuelos' show, everyone matters equally.